And then he said, go and Google narcissistic sociopath. And as I started to read it, I was like,
Do you think, looking back, that you had to get to that place to get to the place you're in now?
I'm going to create a franchise and licensing business, and that's called the Mental Wellbeing Company. And at launch, we took 1.9 million. We were the fastest growing franchise in the UK. If I'm going to keep sitting there saying my life is like this because of you, my life is never going to change. So at some point, we have to take ownership and responsibility of our own life. If we had to give notice for those people to leave, I'm the villain. I am the villain because all of a sudden it's all about money for me then. And that's been really difficult. People are literally physiologically addicted to stress and struggle. Literally. I'm always really conscious about what I post on social media because I'm still very much aware I was the woman who lost everything and had less than nothing. But there is a huge missing piece around mental health and trauma healing, which is that nervous system stuff. If I hadn't done that, I would absolutely not be where I am now.
Are you a bit worried that the audience might not get it?
Okay, let's us, my friends, start here. Can you have possibly imagined 13 years ago when you were sitting in a repossessed house in the midst of depression, anxiety, just discovering that you'd been through sort of an abusive marriage, which you didn't really realise at the time, which we're going to touch on? Can you have in any way imagined that you would have the life that you have now?
No. Absolutely not.
Are you proud of yourself? Just to put it on you straight away.
You know what? Sometimes you forget where you were and sometimes you have to pause and think. And it almost feels a bit surreal because it's kind of like, oh my God, because I can still really remember, you know, kids being asleep. I would wake up filled with anxiety, pins and needles, knowing I'd got to get through the day, knowing I needed to be a mum. And I'd go into my bathroom in the house we were in that got repossessed. I'd sit on the bathroom floor. I would literally put my hand on the toilet and try not to have a panic attack. And sometimes I wouldn't, sometimes I would. And also self-harmed as well. So I used literally the end of my toothpaste on the top of my thighs. And at the time I felt so much shame as a mum. I thought I knew I shouldn't be doing that. I thought I'm a failure, I'm a bad mum. You know, I need to pull myself together, saying all the things that you would say to yourself. And being really critical of myself because obviously been in the abusive relationship, didn't even know because there wasn't any physical bruises. So I didn't even know any of that. So I felt like, how could I not know? How could I be so stupid? You know, I need to be a good mum for the kids. And I felt like a complete failure. So I can still literally picture myself sat in that bathroom right now.
You went there in your eyes.
I did. I can literally see it as clear as day in my head.
Can you feel it still?
Yeah, I can. As I'm talking about it, I can feel my heart rate's just slightly increased.
I've got a bit of a knot in my stomach as you're saying it. Like, oh.
And do you know what? I feel quite emotional because I think all the stuff that I now know, when I look back at that woman, you know, I feel so much compassion for her with what she was holding. You know, she'd lost a mum a number of years prior to that and just had so much hope for marriage and life and kids and, you know, living and doing all good stuff and everything. And I felt I wasn't even at rock bottom. I was lower than rock bottom, but I had to keep going for my kids. And I genuinely know if I didn't have kids, I wouldn't be here today. Really? I was that low. Yeah.
Do you think, looking back, that you had to get to that place to get to the place you're in now? Could you have achieved the heights that you've achieved now and are still going to no doubt go on to achieve without being that low? Or could there have been an easier way to get here?
Yeah, I've thought about that sometimes because you often hear, don't you, people who get to certain places, it's like they've got a story behind it as well. And, you know, I don't know because I've not kind of had the other side of that necessarily. But what I do know is it gave me a drive like nothing else. But actually, the drive wasn't necessarily about myself at the time. My drive was to give my kids a better life. I didn't want them to feel ever what I felt, experience ever what I had experienced. And I wanted more for them. So I was very driven for them actually more than myself. So again, had I not got children and I'd gone through that, let's say if I hadn't done anything to myself, I don't know whether I would be where I am now. My kids were a real driving force for me because my only sense of worth at that time was being a mother, nothing else. So if I failed at being a mother, what did I have? So actually, probably for me more than anything, it was having children that drove me forward. I would say being in that situation above everything else.
Do you still do it for the children, or have you switched at some point to doing this for yourself now, or for the impact you could have to other people?
It's probably something I still work on, if I'm honest with that, because my kids, my kids were really young. They were only sort of 3 and 6 when I split up from my ex-husband. So, of course, being a single mum at that point, I didn't have my mum around. My dad lived close to me and, was probably about as useful as a chocolate teapot, so to speak. His emotions aren't the best as such. And one of my sisters lived in America and the other one was a couple of hours drive away. So everyone was doing the best to their capabilities, but I still felt very let down. And I've had lots of discussions with my family about this, because if you said to my sisters, were you there for Caroline? They'd be like, absolutely. But I felt they should be knocking on my door, coming round, because I felt lonely. I felt at rock bottom, and I felt like I was just on this planet to be a mother at that particular point. And I feel like when I look back and think about that situation and where my kids were at the time, and then, they're 18 and 21 now, I still have to work on not doing everything I do for my children. It's still very much in me, even to the extent of how I've built my businesses. I have always taken my children to school. Literally, you could probably count on one hand the days I haven't taken them.
Still today, you had to take them.
I mean, they both drive now, which brings a whole other element to it. So they both drive themselves now. But I absolutely built my business around taking them to school, picking them up from school, being at every single thing. And I think their friends' parents who worked over the years, and even the ones who didn't work over the years, I was always the mum at the school gates. I was always the one picking them up. Even as I started my business, everything. If you look back, people who know me will know I don't go to many events, even now. If you see me at an event, it's because I have to be at that event. For whatever reason, it's either my own event, and I sometimes get them to help, or I've had to do it for I know there's a real benefit to the business. But outside of that, you won't see me going to an event to open an envelope. You just won't see me there. My kids are my world. And for me, it's always been really, really important to be there for them. And maybe there's also some my own trauma in that, because I've had to be the mum and the dad for them. So I don't want them to ever feel anything less than they deserve to feel. So I've always made sure, but it's still something I have to work on, because even now, when they're going out and doing their own thing, it's like I'm checking in that, okay, they're okay, I will do this. There's still that piece inside of me that wants to make sure they never feel less than who they are and what they deserve to feel.
What's this era of life thrown up for you then, when one's about to become this high-flying barrister, the other one potentially, based on A-level results, is going to go off to a fancy university a long way from home? Is this...
Yeah.
Because obviously I love the fact that you say you're always a work in progress. To most people who are watching this podcast, you are sort of an icon of the trauma therapy, coaching, consultancy space. But you say that you're always a work in progress. What is coming up for you now is you're thinking, I have to step back and let them fly the nest, but
I think it's at the core of all of the work I do. So the word capacity is something I use a lot. And when we talk about nervous system and capacity, it's holding everything. So I'm holding right now in my capacity excitement for them of the next stages of their life. I'm also holding a bereft mother part that they are leaving home. And, one will be going to university at the end of September. One's going traveling around the world on his own next January for 6 months before he starts his barrister training. So I'm holding all of that. Yeah, great excitement for them. And then also, and also that other part of me of, gosh, all the things that I've worked for their lives. It's like, what next? What am I going to build, so to speak? And I think that's when I come back to the purpose of what I do. But that capacity piece, that is what enables me to feel angry, to feel hurt, to feel sad, to feel like I want to rip someone's head off one day, to feel like I want to cry one day. and hold all of that and still stay regulated enough to feel all of that and still be able to move forward. So yeah, with the kids, adult kids, I can hold all of that, but I can still show up for them excited. I'm not going to make them feel guilty. I'm not going to make them think, oh, poor mom or anything else like that. They would never think that. That's my stuff. They don't need to know that. Yeah. My stuff is I work through that. I'm excited for you. You see that part of me. The other stuff is my stuff.
Is that why we're in this beautiful sort of healing office space and there's no staff that have to come here at all? Is this your sanctuary for working through your own stuff that you might be coming up right now?
Yeah, I mean, environment is really, really important to me in every sense. Smell, space, sound, all of those things. And, you can see we're in my offices right now. None of the team are in, but team do come in. But again, happy team is really important to me. If they want to work from home, great, work from home. Still with KPIs and you still got everything you need to hit. But if you're doing that, I'm okay with that. When we need to come in, we need to come in. If I work from home, I'm still equally as productive at home as I am in here. Sometimes it is just nice to come in and be in my office on my own. It's a huge amount of space and it just enables me to think and just be. And again, that high performing piece as such, I can just come and, think about ideas and be creative. And it's just a really great space. So whether I'm at home or in my office, I still feel really grounded. I don't feel like I'm in a cooped up office somewhere and I'm looking at a brick wall. I can go for a walk here if I want, or I can look out in my garden at home. That for me is super special and I don't take it for granted and I feel real gratitude for it.
Gratitude. This is the final sort of like prodding you on self-congratulations I'm going to do because I feel like I'm not going to thank you otherwise. Gratitude, yes. But do you also, when you look out over the beautiful land that you have at home or maybe the beautiful home that you've created or this amazing space, like I say, there's a lake and a sauna and a gym and the building's beautiful. Do you ever, as well as gratitude, go, well done you? Or is that something you should work on or could work on?
Maybe I should say that more. I think I don't feel like I work. I know that seems really sad. I feel like everything I went through was to get me to the point that I am. And the gratitude isn't necessarily in this stuff that I have. The gratitude is in the experience that I have had to get me to where I am and to what I can create and do. And I feel an incredible sense of purpose in that. And even as I talk about it, the drive inside of me, if you took away my house, my offices, everything, I would still do what I did. My other half says to me sometimes, what would you do if you won the lottery? And I say, I'd probably do it for free. Because I wouldn't stop doing it. I would absolutely still do it because, what I experienced and what I went through, I don't want anyone else to experience that to the level I did or for as long as I sat in kind of my own pity party and feeling like a victim in all of that too, with reason. But yeah, the gratitude piece, I think, is I even feel grateful to my ex-husband, which sounds very strange to some people. Like, how can you feel? Because actually, he highlighted all of those kind of wounds and traumas that were already there. He just shone a great big spotlight on it as well. So actually, he made me face that, and because of him making me face that, I now know what is important and the difference I want to make. So yes, it's all stuff. The one thing I will spend money on for me personally more than anything is holidays. I love traveling. My kids love traveling. I will spend money on that. But flash stuff, not bothered. It's meaningless, really. Again, it's nice, but it's meaningless.
Okay. We might come back to that later.
Yeah.
Now, obviously for some of our listeners, because we're primarily a business owning community, so they might not know of exactly what it is that you do. And obviously a lot of the other content that is out there is your expertise within narcissistic trauma recovery and therapy. So I think for the context of everybody who might not know how you've built the brand that you have, can you just take us back to where you started and what was the experience that you went through? Because a lot of people listening might not even know what narcissistic abuse actually is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, narcissistic abuse is a form of domestic abuse, which is trauma. So I was married many, many years ago, and I just completely lost myself in my marriage. But there was no physical abuse. It was very subtle, psychological, emotional, financial, gaslighting, a lot of stuff that made me lose my identity, who I was. I put on weight. I would drink alcohol. I would wear grey baggy tracksuits. I wanted to be invisible. My job at the time, I was a podiatrist, so I was a foot doctor. But I actually gave up work when we had children. So I was totally reliant on my ex-husband for finances, all of that. He worked away from home a lot. He was cabin crew for an airline. So he was away a lot of the time. So I invariably felt a bit like a single mother a lot of the time anyway. And then when he came back, it would be like on edge. And it felt like this constant emotional roller coaster, so to speak. But I thought that was normal because that's how I felt as a kid. When my dad would walk home and he would walk in the house, what mood is he going to be in? Oh, he's okay. Or, oh, I need to be careful. Or he'd have a row with one of my sisters or something. And, you know, and I didn't want that. I was definitely this people pleaser and high achiever and perfectionist because I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't like conflict at all. And so when I was in my relationship with my ex, I thought that I wasn't enough. So I needed to try harder, do more, be more, everything. Because I'd learned my worth was wrapped up in transaction. You know, I wasn't worthy just for being Caroline. I needed to do something, be something, act a certain way for them to behave a certain way, for me then to go, okay, I've got a sense of worth now. I didn't learn it was inherent within me. And when we eventually split up, again, I still did not know it was an abusive relationship, but we'd been having marriage counselling at the time. And when we came out of the marriage, I continued with my marriage counselling. And there was a lot that started to come to light. And, you know, I remember thinking, why isn't he apologizing? Why isn't he acknowledging some of these things? And I remember the counsellor we were seeing at the time, I remember he put his hands on my shoulders and he said, stop waiting for an apology. That is never, ever going to happen. And I was like, how can he not see that though? And then he said, go and Google narcissistic sociopath. So I was a bit like, oh, okay. So I went home and Googled this. And as I started to read it, I was like, it started to click and make sense. And it's one of those words, narcissist, that is really frowned upon. It is overused. And, but it's a word that really gave me a name for the experience that I had. And it made me feel like it's not my fault. I was then diagnosed. I've got anxiety, depression. I was diagnosed with PTSD. I was seeing a psychotherapist. I was diagnosed with PTSD, which I now know is complex PTSD. Obviously, I was having panic attacks and self-harming. And then over the years, I also had some physical chronic illnesses, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I got diagnosed with a heart condition, IBS, metabolic disorder. All of these things that in isolation, if you get a diagnosis, you know, they would diagnose you, but no one was ever looking at what's the root cause of why you've got these as well. And when we came out of my marriage, I realized we were also in over £70,000 worth of debt. Now, I thought we were maybe £8,000-10,000, you know, fairly average amongst the friendship group that I was in, but it was over 70 grand. So you can imagine, as a single mum, didn't have a mum, I was there. I felt really alone, and I felt filled with shame. I thought, how could I be so stupid to end up in this abusive relationship?
You didn't even know it was abusive.
I didn't even know.
Yeah.
Because it's not like a light switch. It wasn't that his behavior changed from day 1 to day 10, and then all of a sudden it was like this. This was insidious over years of chipping away at your sense of worth and who you were. And when we split up, I went back to working 1 day a week, running a clinic as a podiatrist. But of course, the money coming in did not equal the money coming out. And, you know, I used to bin every letter unless I could see a bit of red on it, or it was the council tax, because I knew I'd go to prison if I didn't pay my council tax, and I needed to make sure I paid that. But I was constantly robbing Peter to pay Paul, calling up like the gas company saying my credit card's been cloned. So they would be so lovely and say, oh, should we just log that on for next month then? When it gets oh, yes, great. So yes, my direct debit would slightly go up the following month, but it meant a month I'd got free of £50 that I wouldn't have to pay or something. And that would be food and stuff. So it was this constant struggle all of the time. And I remember in 2013, when I had my house repossessed, April 2013, because I couldn't afford the mortgage at all, because my ex moved a couple of hours away and I was living in the family home at the time and he was paying child maintenance. but it didn't cover everything anywhere near. And obviously I was on universal credits at the time. I had a little job, obviously working as a podiatrist, but actually bizarrely, if I worked more, I would end up with less.
Yes, sadly.
So I was in this kind of catch-22 where I wanted more for my children, but actually if I did more, I'd end up with less.
Yes, yeah.
But I still wanted more. And that's when I actually started a little home-based business and started to earn a bit of extra money, like 50 quid a week. But it was the personal development side in that I kind of really enjoyed. And as I was building a team in that, it was the helping of people. So as I started to earn some extra money, I kept thinking, I was seeing a counsellor at the time. I was seeing a psychotherapist at the time. And it was really good in those moments because I felt as someone was listening to me and validating my experiences. But the moment I went outside of that room, I was still really angry, or I didn't want to get out of bed. So again, I thought something was wrong with me. I am doing everything you're meant to be doing to support your mental health. And when I'm in the sessions, I feel like I can take on the world because someone's listening to me. But the moment I went outside of that room and I'd see my ex and I'd be shaking or something would happen, I thought, why am I not getting better? Why am I not feeling better if I'm doing what you're meant to be doing? And I started to research this and think, well, surely it can't just be me. There's got to be something else. And that's when I found the nervous system piece, what we call a bottom-up approach to trauma and mental health, and not just a top-down. So all kinds of talk therapy, counselling, psychotherapy, psychology. It's what we call top-down. It's just neck up. It's just talking about it. And it's good to talk. We know the phrase. But just talking about stuff doesn't change how you feel. You don't think anxiety, you don't think depression, you feel it in your body. So I started to realize that it's a huge missing piece in how I felt and understanding the whole abuse element of it. And I started, because I was feeling so angry at everybody else, but I didn't know how to come out of that. So I completely retrained. As I started to earn money in the home-based business, and I was chipping away at my debt, in the end, I actually totally retrained because I thought I can't be the only one. I started to post on social media about my experiences and it just really took off. I started working with people one-to-ones, became very full very, very quickly. In my first year of starting my business doing that, I was on 6 figures plus. I was working a lot. But, there was such a need for it. And then I thought there's got to be a better way for this from a business perspective. And what I realized actually at that time as well, James, is I feel very blessed that I definitely had a lot of knowledge with the trainings that I had, but I also had quite a good entrepreneur knowledge as well. And interestingly, both my sisters used to say to me as a kid, you could tell I'd got an entrepreneur flair. But both my parents were very traditional, very academic, get your degree, get your job for 40 years, that kind of thing. So that was always quashed. So it felt like I'd got this one-to-one business and everything else now. And I thought, and it felt like I could tap in a bit to my entrepreneurship then. So I started to do group programs and online stuff as well. And I remember I did my very first launch. I earned £58,000. And I remember thinking, wow.
That's a lot of money.
Wow, I know. But I'd got a big audience by that time as well. I'd kind of done a £10 a month membership and I'd done my one-to-ones. And then I kind of built this launch and I earned £58,000 and I was like, wow.
You could have paid off the mortgage.
I know. Literally, it was such a huge amount of money for me. And it gave me a sense of what's possible. And there was two things in that moment. It was what's possible financially, and what's possible reaching people as well and using social media. Because when I first started using social media, I was still very much feeling anxious a lot of the time. If I didn't have kids, I could have quite happily become agoraphobic as well. And so it was a really great way. And I sort of thought of Facebook initially like a science, really. How does it work? How do you get more followers? How do you get your audience out there? What do you do? And I really enjoyed it as well. So, and then as people were going through my group programs and they were seeing results around the nervous system piece as well, they started saying to me, well, we want to do what you do. How can we do that? And I sat there probably for about 10 months actually thinking, that's nice for them asking that. Because I thought, who am I to create a certification around that. Even though I've invested and I've got lots of trainings now under my belt, I've got postgrad in positive psychology. I've done a load of other somatic modalities. And I also want to add, I could have trained to be a psychologist. I could have quite easily done that. I chose not to. And this isn't about dissing psychologists or those who work in that space of talking. It absolutely isn't. Because it was helpful for me, but it didn't change how I felt. So I didn't want to go down that route. I actually wanted to do the nervous system stuff. I chose to do that. And actually, in some respects, that stood against me because, getting on TV and doing stuff, they want a psychologist a lot of the time or a psychotherapist. They don't want a nervous system expert or someone who does somatic work around, the physiological piece. I very much focus on physiology as opposed to just psychology. So it's done me no favors in that respect, but I believe that is the way of the future around mental health and trauma healing. So in the end, I wrote a coaching certification because I thought I can't do therapy and teach that as such. So I wrote a coaching certification that was ICF and CPD accredited. And I remember I did my first launch with that. And I think it was just over £600,000 for my first launch doing that.
Wow.
And again, I thought, wow. And it wasn't always about the money. It was about the ripple effect as well. So training people. And this was very much with a specialism in narcissism to start with. Then I got people saying to me, but I don't want to do narcissism. So I then created a somatic trauma-informed coaching certification as well. That was just very much focused on the nervous system piece. And we had I think it was about a £280,000 launch we had then. And then what I found as I was doing more of the launches and, we were getting towards the £1 million with them was as people were doing that, then the difference we wanted to make, the people who were then really well trained, they didn't have the entrepreneurship skills to build a business. They wanted to build a business, but they didn't know how. So all of that business is what was called my School of Healing and Growth. So then I thought, okay, what's next? Listening to my audience again. So then I thought, okay, if I want to keep standards really high, I'm going to create a franchise and licensing business. And that's called the Mental Wellbeing Company. So that launched in April 2024. And at launch, we took 1.9 million. At launch for that. We were the fastest growing franchise in the UK. And so they went through the certifications, or I now have a qualification in trauma-informed coaching and leadership, the world's only. So they go through that qualification, then we teach them the business skills. We've got assets in there, workshops, tons of stuff in there for people to build a business in this space. And then as I was building my business, I realized as I was bringing team in, the challenge of that. The challenge of finding good team, the challenge of that and being trauma informed. I think had I not done the work I'd done, I don't even know whether I'd have built a business or got more team. It's still always a challenge. Even today, that is a challenge because you want to give people opportunity, but you're also still running a business. And I realized I'm not the only one like that. So I created TIDAL. So TIDAL stands for Trauma Informed Development and Learning. And it's very much, we're a CMI centre, so Chartered Management Institute. And it teaches leaders and managers trauma-informed leadership and management. And that is, again, about capacity, the nervous system. So for leaders and managers to be able to hold a capacity big enough for the pressure, for the stress, not waiting for the absence of it, not burning out. When we talk about burnout, for me, is not that you're doing too much. Burnout is you haven't got the capacity to do what you need to be doing, but you can work on that with doing some nervous system stuff. So that's where TIDAL came in. And of course, I sit over the top of all of that too. So it's been pretty organic in how I've built it, but every build of a business has had to come with a strong foundation. It's have to be of the highest standards, being a CMI centre, looking at the franchise as well of everything that's in there with the accredited workshops, the branding, so it's spot on with that. It has to be of a high standard. And at the core of that as well is customer service. So people feeling part of a community, part of something special. Even my team now, there's 19 in my team now. Everybody's come into the team, probably either they've experienced their own struggle or a family member has. So we all see it as it's bigger than us. All of it is bigger than us. And a lot of us, it's not just one person in one business. We work across the board because they all interlink. with all of that too. So it's grown organically, but still with a focus, and still, I still have a very big drive underneath all of that as well.
Let's pause there, because what Caroline's really talking about here is a very important balance in brand building. Listen to your audience, but do not abandon what you actually believe in. And I think Caroline is a great example of this. Her business has clearly evolved by listening to what people were actually asking for. People went through her programs and said, how can we do what you do? So she created a certification. Then people said, we want to use this work beyond narcissistic abuse. So she created a wider somatic trauma-informed coaching certification. Then people had the training, but they didn't know how to turn that into a business. So she created a franchise and a licensing model as well. That is smart. It's not guessing. It's not forcing a product into the market. It's listening to the audience and letting demand show you the next move. But here's something that I think also really matters. Caroline did not just take the easiest commercial route. She could have easily gone down the more obvious psychology route. That probably, in all honesty, would have been easier for people to understand. It may have opened more traditional media doors. It may have fitted more neatly into an already established system, but she chose not to, because she believed that the missing piece wasn't just psychological, it was physiological. It was actually somatic work that actually helped people feel different, not just understand what was happening to them. But that choice is most definitely the harder road, because when the market doesn't fully understand what you do, you have to educate them as well as sell to them. We've talked about this loads before on the pod. Episodes such as Raj from Hytro or Thomas from the Turmeric Company show just how important the education piece can be for some brands. You basically have to explain the problem differently if there's education that needs to happen as well. You have to have faith before the world is finally caught up with what it is that you're telling them. And this is where real conviction matters. The lesson here isn't just listen to your audience. The real lesson is listen to your audience and then build the thing that they need in a way that still aligns with what you know to be true. Because the best brands are not built by blindly following demand. And they're also not built by ignoring the marketplace either. Now, let's get back to it.
I've never heard you talk so openly. Obviously, me and you have had conversations separately about some of the launches and what the business has been doing, which is why I was so excited.
We don't normally talk about business, do we?
No,
it's
I
more
suppose
the
we
sort
don't.
Of trauma stuff.
But also, I think in a lot of businesses, in a lot of sort of like day-to-day world, you wouldn't necessarily talk about revenue, turnover, challenges, etc. You and I come from a world where it's a bit more, I guess, open to that, the personal development space, the coaching, training space. But I think whereas, if any like training that I've done, whether it be branding, podcasting, coaching, whatever it may be, that's one thing. But you are dealing with human beings who are at their lowest ebb, at their most vulnerable. And what I've been so impressed with what you've built is a brand that has stayed true to that, but you're still like a bit of a business gangster. You know what you're doing business-wise, but you still have got the heart behind it.
Yeah, I think,
were you mindful of that to start with? Because
and still am.
Really? Okay.
I still feel like, and I'm always really conscious, about what I post on social media, because I'm still very much aware I was the woman who lost everything and had less than nothing. So I'm also aware if I'm posting about something.
Your car. You never wanted to post about your car the last time I was here.
I still never have. I've just bought another one literally a couple of days ago.
Well, you should be driving around in so many fleet of Ferraris if you don't like she's not.
Definitely not. But yeah, because I don't want, I want to get the balance right between aspiration, inspiration, and ownership and responsibility. I think is a really big part of that too. I think I sat in a place of blaming everybody else for a long period of time.
Right.
And I want to get the balance right, because I think when we've experienced abusive relationships or trauma, we very often sit in a place of, I feel like this because of you. My life is like this because of you. And it may well be like that in part. But if I'm going to keep sitting there saying my life is like this because of you, my life is never going to change. So at some point, we have to take ownership and responsibility of our own life. And that can be really difficult, because you don't want to exonerate somebody from maybe being abusive towards you. But if I'm going to keep focusing on my ex-husband and what he did to me, well, that's a waste of my energy at some point, because he's not going to change. He never has. So I can keep focusing on that and stay where I am.
who's that helping? Well, it's not helping me or my children in any of that. And I think for many of us, again, because we've learned about externalizing our worth and it's other people's fault, we find it very difficult to look in the mirror. We find it very difficult to take that ownership and responsibility, because what if we fail? What if I do take ownership and then I'm still stuck in the same place 12 months down the line? What if I become visible and people are mean or horrible or judge me? So we sit in that space. So it's the understanding of the reason I would externalize or blame others was a trauma response, because it was easy to make my life your fault than sit in my life is because of my choices and my decisions as such. And that can be a really hard place. And you've got to get the balance right between explanation and excuse, because, yes, I shouldn't have been abused in a relationship. But then at what point do I take ownership of the rest of my life and say, I can sit here and say I'm an abused woman till the day I die and live a life like that? Or, and this is where the balance comes in when I use social media, and that's why I'm always really conscious of gentle love and stuff as well, of, you know what, it has happened and it shouldn't have happened. And, honoring the experience that you have had, but let's try and work moving forward now, but still honoring your past. It's not erasing your past. It's, do you want to still keep living day to day in the present as if you're still in your past? And that's all that nervous system work. So for me, the balance of what I share is about hope. It's about inspiration. It's about aspiration. But I still want to get that balance right, because people don't want to know the ins and outs of my life, or, what I might spend on skincare, for instance, as a 52-year-old woman, and fighting it to the death, so to speak. And I'll spend a fortune on that.
Bit of trauma surface together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's getting that balance right, and kind of gently giving people a bit of a nudge of, okay, and not shaming people in that. It's a very sensitive topic, I think, because you need to honor the experience, but also, do you want to stay where you are, or do you want to do something about it? And that's, for me, where that whole nervous system piece comes in, because the way then we can learn and talk about it and work with that is a way of understanding kindly about who you were. So when I think of the younger version of myself going through all of this, I don't think, God, you stupid cow, Caroline, how could you be in all of this? I look back and think, wow, she was in a relationship that felt her version of love because of what it was in her childhood. And I can start to understand it, not just a psychological perspective, but physiologically as well, what that feels like, because your nervous system and your brain likes what feels familiar. So what feels familiar to me was in a relationship not feeling good enough. That was my version of normal. If you'd have put Prince Charming in front of me, I'd have sabotaged that relationship, because I needed to be in a relationship where I'd get some hits of dopamine and some hits of cortisol. It needed to have both of those elements in it for me to actually feel safe. So if you gave me all the dopamine, I'd sabotage it. I'd need cortisol in all of that as well.
So you needed an essence of trauma or challenge or upheaval because of what you were brought up with.
And this is what I see in business a lot of the time. And this is why when we talk about, the team piece, and what I've learned is there are a huge amount of people out there right now building a business, particularly because you hear so much about burnout. People are literally physiologically addicted to stress and struggle. Literally, cortisol is a hormone. And people, if you're pumping out cortisol, living your life in survival, and people may not know that because they're still functioning, they're still doing the do. But actually, if you're living in survival, doing the do, so to speak, at some point your body will give. You'll get some chronic illnesses, you'll get inflammation, because if you're as human beings, with our number one priority is survival and to move away from pain. So if we're fully focused living in survival, all of the other systems in our body aren't functioning effectively. So that's when autoimmune disorders, digestive issues, endocrine issues, skin conditions, psoriasis, eczema, these are bodies in inflammation because you're pumping out cortisol because you're living in a survival response. The problem being with that is if you've been doing that for a long period of time, the moment your business might be starting to get calm, or the moment your life is starting to have a sense of peace, you need the cortisol again. You are
drop a bomb in.
Yeah, you will pivot. You'll suddenly then do a business in something else. You'll create drama somewhere because your body is physiologically craving the cortisol in it. And people get addicted to that feeling, not from choice. It's just what feels their version of safe and normal, because the body then is braced for the fight or flight because it's ready for whatever is going to happen. And to take that away from somebody, they might not want to feel like this. This is where the psychology, physiology is. They know they don't want to feel like that, and they'll go and do calming exercises and stuff like this. The problem being is if you don't understand the science behind all of this, somebody who is in that fight-flight response all of the time and you're saying calm down, if they calm down too much, they will go into a collapse state and go into a real freeze, because too calm to somebody who's been braced for so long feels dangerous. So you just have to have enough energy to discharge there to still have some, but not get rid of it too much, because then your body will shut down as well. So you've got to understand the science behind fight, flight and freeze as survival responses. But if you're running your businesses in these, very often people are actually doing the wrong thing and actually making it worse because they don't understand the physiology behind all of that.
And like you said, we crave familiarity as humans. So if you've got that sense of, oh my God, I'm up against it, you probably subconsciously, maybe this is my own trauma coming to the surface here, I feel like I'm in freeze right now. We've talked about this before many times, but I suppose if
you're still functioning.
But you're still functioning, but you almost feel like, if I don't feel a bit anxious, then I'm not trying hard enough. I'm not pushing hard enough. I'm not achieving stuff. If I step off the gas, I'm going backwards.
Yeah. And it's a really good way of thinking about it from your nervous system state. So think of fight, flight, like I've got my foot on the accelerator. Think of freeze, I've got my foot on the brake. Now, if we're regulated, because we've got the capacity for this, I'm building my business. Oh, I need to do a bit more today. I'm just going to put my foot on the accelerator here because I'm doing this, but I'm not in shutdown or burnout. Okay. I've got the balance right. Now it's like, I'm going to have a nice bath and relax and everything. So I'm just going to put my foot on the brake a little bit. The problem with a lot of people is they've got their foot rammed down on the accelerator and they're like this all of the time. And actually many can often get diagnosed with ADHD at this point as well. And really we need to be asking every diagnosis of ADHD, what's the trauma history as well? It's a really, really important point because it could be both, or it could actually just be trauma, or it could just be ADHD.
Being misdiagnosed.
Misdiagnosed, yeah,
wow,
absolutely.
Okay.
And then on the other side of that, if someone's just got their foot on the brake all of the time, struggling to get out of bed, they're going to feel a lot of shame. But actually, it's survival physiology here. A lot of people as well have what we call high dorsal tone. They've got their foot rammed on the brake and the accelerator. Yeah. So outside, they look like they're not doing too much. You might think they're in freeze, but inside they're like wired. So if you sit down at the end of the day and you feel like your mind is going, your body is going, there's a lot of sympathetic charge in there, but you're feeling exhausted on the outside, that's what we call a high dorsal tone. So you're feeling all of this fizziness inside. You watch TV, you're flicking the channels all the time, or you try and read and you're everywhere, or you're scrolling. You literally can't sit still. And then for others, they sit still, but go into a collapse as well. So if you're trying to run your business like this as well, it's so difficult because at some point, your body will give way. It might start to whisper at you and we might get away from it for a long period of time. But at some point, your body will absolutely shout at you with an illness or burnout or whatever that might be. Or you're just not being high performing because your capacity is kind of here. So you've got all your life going into a capacity this size, you're going to shut down. You can't cope. So you'll have days when you're on it and then days when you're not. And you've kind of got this roller coaster because your capacity isn't there. If you build a capacity to cope with everything going on in your life, I think even the last month, my dad's been in hospital. We thought he was going to die. I've lost someone in the business who was a friend. And that's been tough. There's been a lot of grief wrapped up in all of that. My daughter started her A-levels. My son's doing stuff, building a business, all of these. If I didn't have the capacity to hold all of that, I'd probably be rocking in a corner somewhere, literally.
How do you develop the capacity?
Over time.
And is there practical stuff that you're doing? Because like I say, this is what I've been so impressed with you, because I know the person behind all this as well. And I know the heart of the person behind all of this. And, you know, you've got hundreds of thousands of followers on your Instagram and social media, millions of people listen to your podcast, millions in revenue across the businesses. But I understand, I think I've got a sense of, I really know who you are from the work we've done together before. But you're a very smart cookie as well, as being very kind and loving and having the capacity to help other people. What do you do from a sort of a realistic perspective to develop your own capacity so that Caroline can operate this thing at the level that you are?
And interesting, I have just created a framework for this for other people to follow actually as well. And I call it Capacity Plus. So the C stands for curiosity. So what we do is what a lot of people don't do is we are actually tracking sensations more than our thoughts. A lot of people think our thoughts come first and then we feel whatever our thoughts are telling us. It's actually the other way around. We will feel first because our brain and our body is always scanning for cues of safety and danger based on our past experiences. And the moment we start to feel something, our narration of that fits the sensation based on what has happened in our past. So what a lot of people do is they either try to push through it or they just stop and they don't do anything. And actually, our body is an incredible machine. And it was designed, if you think about wild animals being chased by a lion, for instance, an antelope being chased by a lion, you know, that antelope will immediately go into a flight response. It will run away. Then let's say the lion catches the antelope, it will go into a fight response. It's trying to survive. And then let's say the antelope thinks, I'm going to die here. It will go into a freeze. It will play dead because then hopefully the lion will think it's killed the antelope. And all of these are natural survival responses. It's not the antelope being weak, then letting go. It's literally, because we often think that as human beings, these are survival responses that are involuntary, because our nervous system is always trying to protect us. And in that moment when the antelope, let's say, has played dead and the lion thinks, great, I've now killed it, because it's tired, the lion, because it's chased the antelope, the lion might go off for a sleep and think, I'll go back to the antelope. And the antelope, even if that antelope is lying on the floor in freeze, so even the person in bed each day thinking, I can't get out of bed, they're not weak. They're not a failure. They're scanning for when it feels safe enough to get out because of their experiences. So that antelope will be scanning. And the moment that antelope thinks it's safe, it will mobilize some energy back in the body and it will go into a flight response again and run away. What happens at that point with that antelope is it's filled with cortisol at that point because it's had that sympathetic fight-flight response. So what it does is it shakes it out. Literally, that's when we see animals shaking it out, because animals work second to second to second, present moment, present moment, present moment. The antelope doesn't go and sit under the tree and go, oh my God, I've been chased by a lion again. What's wrong with me? Why did it pick me? Why did it pick me to come and chase me or anything? And over-narrate all of this.
Imagine if it did, though.
I know. Imagine if humans did that and thought, why me and everything else. But animals don't do that. They shake out that survival energy. And then literally the antelope will go, oh, what shall I have for my dinner now? And go and start eating. The antelope is not stuck in the past. It's not kind of thinking, oh my God, and looking around or anything. It's bang in the present moment again. That doesn't happen for us as human beings. We have our front part of our brain, our neocortex. We overthink things. We create stories to match all of these things. Not because we're choosing to. Everything is about keeping us safe, to keep us away from pain. And very often for us as human beings, that's emotional pain as well. It's not, if someone attacked us, we would automatically go into a survival response. But many of us are living in survival responses, even though there's no actual danger. But it's very often emotional danger of what other people might think of us or say to us or all of those things too. So, when we're talking about the capacity plus of what to do, we've got to track sensations with that. So the C stands for curiosity. So if I'm in a situation, let's say let's say someone said something mean to me, okay? I don't think, I might have a part of me that feels like that, but that's not going to serve me because I can't control anybody else. What I get curious about is, why am I feeling like this when they behave like that? So it's the curiosity and the awareness in that moment of, Okay. And then the P is pause. And then we allow. And the allow is a part most people miss. So I'm curious about, okay, why am I feeling like this when they're behaving like this? And I pause and I allow myself to feel the sensations of that. That point for most people, they don't allow, they feel it and they go on to do something else, or they rant at the other person, or they, go and do whatever they need to do. But actually with the nervous system work, we allow those sensations to happen. And we allow them to happen by containing them without being too much. Because if we start to feel too much at that point, then we can go into a shutdown state or get really, really angry. And we don't want to do that because, again, that's not productive for us. So we feel just enough. We stretch the nervous system to what the sensations will allow us to feel at that point. If it starts to feel too much, we can orient to a space and bring in the senses. If we bring in senses, biologically, we can't stay in our emotional part of the brain. It brings us back into our front part. So we're now then in the containment. Then with intention, we are going to titrate all of the little drops of what we are feeling. The problem with our society nowadays is we want quick results. And that is the antithesis of nervous system work. Literally, you can't go fast. It's almost like, think of a tap. If you've got a tap in your bathroom and you turn the tap on full blast, it's going to flood the bathroom at some point. Nervous system work is one drop at a time. One drop, that feels okay. Now I've built a bit of capacity. I'm going to turn it on a bit more. Okay, that feels okay. If you do it too much, too quick, too fast, which actually is what trauma is, you're going to flood your whole system. So you have to go slow. And then the why of capacity is to be safe enough to be you again. So the why is you. A lot of this work is it safe to be you? Have you ever learnt it's safe to be you? Have you ever learnt your worth is just being you, or a version of you, or doing something? So Capacity Plus is about going through the whole of capacity to build your capacity. Because if you do that regularly and really track what you're feeling with what you are experiencing, you'll build your capacity. So that's just a really simple one to do in real life, in real time, because you don't build capacity in the absence of stress, struggle, and challenge. You build it in the presence of it. So if you're trying to create a life of just peace and calm, you won't build capacity. Because then something is going to happen at some point. Sadly, that is what life is. So you've got to build capacity in the presence of stress, struggle, and challenge, which, of course, when you're running a business, stands you in good stead. So it doesn't mean you're not feeling everything. It just means you can stay regulated without being activated or shut down as a leader in your business.
So when something like that happens, like a team member does something wrong, or you have a circumstance or a situation, the capacity model, people are sitting there at home now go, that makes so much sense. Like I'm sitting there going, I should be doing that.
I had
Can you do it in the moment?
Yeah. You can do it.
Do you still have to consciously decide you're going to do it in the moment?
Yes.
Do you?
So I am even as I'm sat here, I've just so in tune with my body, I would automatically track my sensations. And even subconsciously, if I'm feeling something, I would be like, okay, my heart's increasing now, or I'm feeling that, or I'm noticing all of that. Because for years, I lived in what's called functional freeze, probably the most socially acceptable survival response for all of us to live, because we're in a survival response, but it's socially acceptable because no one would know and we're still doing what we need to be doing. And many people are building businesses in functional freeze, disconnected. And the reason you can track that and the difference between, say, anxiety and functional freeze, for instance, is sensation. Someone who is anxious, and really anxiety is just a word we're giving to someone who's in a fight-flight response. We can go down the whole route of, so we can give them a diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder to maybe give them medication on all of that. And I have nothing against medication. I've been on it myself. But what's the root cause of why your body's in a fight-flight response in the first place? And is it really a disorder? Is anything a disorder? Or is it really a response to your experience in that moment from your past and in the present with someone triggering that? So when I think about my anxiety that I had, you don't own anxiety, it is a response. So when I had anxiety and depression, for instance, I used to think, how can I have both? If what depression is freeze and anxiety is fight-flight, how can I have both? That's the foot on the gas and the accelerator and the foot on the brake. And it would depend on certain situations then. Some situations I'd get into a fight-flight response labeled as anxiety, and some I'd feel really depressed and in freeze. I wanted to hide. I wanted to get really, really small. So when we start to understand how we operate as human beings, that tracking of our own physiology allows me never to blame anybody else. And that doesn't mean I don't cry. It doesn't mean I don't get angry. It doesn't mean I don't want to rip someone's head off sometimes. But it means I can hold all of that and recognize that's a part of me, some wounded younger part of me feeling like that. I can work with that part of me and still stay regulated in that moment. And every time I'm allowing myself to feel that, like I said, when I had a team member leave recently, for instance, it was really challenging for me, really challenging. I've got a lot of stuff going on with my dad and stuff as well. And I really felt it, but I still got my business to do. So sometimes I could feel it in my body, but I'd still got stuff to do in my business. I'd go and lie on my bed at night then, and my family would leave me to it. I'd go and literally lie on my bed, allow myself to feel what my body wanted to feel. And I might shake. I might cry, I might feel that sense of anger come up. But the beautiful thing about our body is if we allow that to happen, you kind of go up like this as you're feeling it. And then you have a completion and you come down the other side. The problem for many people is as you start to feel it, we suppress it back down again. It feels too much because we're either going too fast or we think, if I'm angry, people will think I'm out of control and chaotic. Because again, we've not been taught what is healthy aggression or healthy anger. How do we express that? Because it is normal to feel that. But a lot of people think if we express anger, we're not in control. But there's ways of expressing it, which is why, again, we come back to that nervous system piece. It's about that energy you feel in the body. So if you're in freeze, so I use our traffic lights of tolerance model to represent your nervous system. So red is freeze. It's what we call that dorsal vagal part of the nervous system. So if we want to go from red to the green, we have to pass through the yellow. And the problem being for many when they're in red and they're feeling nothing, when they start to feel something as they're going into yellow, it will feel scary to start with, or they get a rage coming in. And rather than sitting with the rage and feeling it, they think, oh, I'm out of control here. So they go back down into freeze. So you have to do all of the way through the traffic lights of tolerance from red to yellow to green slowly, so the nervous system can build capacity as you go through without going too fast, because otherwise you'll go back and shut down and stay and freeze again. So you've got to go slow.
So in like in a work environment, let's say, for example, the person's leaving the business and they come and they sit in your office and they say, look, I'm going, and do you almost contain the emotion or suppress it for the moment, knowing you're going to deal with it later? So in the antelope example, the antelope escapes the lion and goes, I feel better now, going to crack on with my day, and skips off into the jungle. Are you consciously going, I'm going to hold that, I don't want to explode here, I know it's there, I can feel it,
yeah,
I'm going to put that in a little box, I'm going to take it home, I'm going to let it out of the box when I get home? Is that how you're doing
it's almost like, let's say I've got a team member.
You can tell I want very tactical stuff here, Caroline. Yeah, maybe I'm going through this myself.
It is, maybe. So let's say someone's saying that to me, okay? And I think this is the key thing. When we build capacity, it's not about one thing or another. It's not, I'm either regulated or I'm not, okay? Regulation is not calm and peace. Regulation is being able to hold anger, pain, hurt, sadness, and still stay regulated. So if I had a team member, maybe that was saying that to me, inside, my heart might be pounding, thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? Or it might be thinking, thank God as well with that. But I'm also a business owner. I'm a leader. And I don't want to show up in that moment going, oh my God, you can't go. Or thank God, go now, because I want to come from a place of self-leadership. So it doesn't mean I'm not going to feel pain or hurt or anger, but that's my stuff. If I'm feeling anything other than compassion or curiosity or clarity or confidence, if I'm feeling anger or if I'm feeling any form of sadness, that is my stuff. It's not for anybody else to fix or make better. That's me. I get curious about where's that coming from? Because if I do that, it means every time I'm building capacity. So for the next time then, I might feel less of that. So it doesn't mean we're not feeling it. It means we have the capacity to be able to hold it without shouting at somebody or crying or ripping somebody's head off in that moment, because we've all got stuff going on. And I think for so many people, they're looking for this magic wand of, I'll build my business when it's like this, or, I will buy that when it's like this, or do this when this happens. What if it never happens? What if instead, and this is where I think people have got it back to front, where they're waiting, what if we built a capacity to hold everything that's happening right now and still move forward and still build your business and still have healthy relationships with boundaries and remove people from your life as well? What if we could have a capacity that holds all of that? That's the piece that I know has helped me in all of this. And it doesn't mean I don't lie on my bed and have a good cry. I do, like when I'm in hospital seeing my dad and I'm really feeling it, but it's not in that moment I want to sit in the hospital like this. Doesn't mean I'm not feeling like I want to do that, but I've got the capacity to hold that to a point where I can either choose to do that or it dissipates enough. But if I didn't have that capacity, it might mean I'm walking through the hospital with tears running down my face. And sometimes that might happen. Sometimes it is too much. I'm not saying I'm regulated 100% of the time. I'm definitely not. But I'm very quick to notice the awareness when I'm not and what to do to bring myself back out of it as well.
You've done a lot of work. When I was looking at your website and your socials in the run up to this, I came up with this sort of thing of like, you've gone from survivor to student, and you're continually a student of your craft, even though a lot of people, as I said earlier, would look to you as the oracle of the thing that you talk about. I still get a definite sense that you are a continual work of art. You're continually being a student.
Definitely. Well, we've all got another level, whoever we are. We all have. I had a great mentor in one of the trainings I did, one of the IFS trainings I did a number of years ago. And she said, the work is never ending. It's always beginning. And I thought, I loved that, because so often we think about where we should be, or we think we're stuck. And actually, if you think the work is never ending, it's just beginning, every single day, what's today going to bring? It's never ending. It's beginning again today, in that moment. So we're not shaming ourselves of what has happened or where we are not. It's just in this moment right now. And I loved that, because it really made me think, there is no destination. There is no destination. We're all a work in progress. But actually, you've got to do the work then as well. A lot of people sit in a space of wanting to get somewhere, but actually they don't realize the somewhere, they don't have the capacity in their nervous system to hold that. People want £1 million business, but let me tell you, a lot of people don't have the nervous system capacity to hold £1 million business. Yeah. So their nervous system's like, oh, no. So they'll have a procrastinating part coming up or a self-sabotaging part coming up. And actually, they may cognitively get frustrated at that, but actually their nervous system is trying to keep them safe, because this is unsafe for them, because they don't have the capacity to hold all of that.
Let's pause there, because I think this is such an important point for anybody who is building a business, especially if you are the leader of that company. Caroline is talking here about capacity, and in simple terms, capacity is your ability to hold what life and business are trying to throw at you at the same time without constantly tipping into chaos, shutdown, or burnout. And that matters because as a founder, the pressure does not stop. It never stops. There'll always be team issues. There's always going to be financial decisions that need to get made. There's always going to be a personal life that's happening in the background as well. And the goal can't be to wait until everything's calm, because that day probably will never come. Sorry to drop that reality bomb on you, but it's never going to happen. The real work is in learning how to lead whilst things are not perfect. She's not saying that leaders should be emotionless. Far from it. She's not saying that you should never feel hurt or angry or sad or stressed or overwhelmed. What Caroline is saying, though, is that you need the capacity to feel those things without making everybody else responsible for them. And that is a very different level of leadership, because when you are the founder, you can and you will affect the whole business for better or for worse. But I think that's something that a lot of founders only learn the hard way, or they certainly think they have to learn it the hard way. They focus on looking after the business, but they forget that they are one of the business's most important assets, not in a fluffy way, but in a very practical way. Your energy affects your decisions. Your regulation affects your leadership. Your emotional capacity affects your ability to deal with pressure. Your health affects the pace that the business can actually sustain. So looking after yourself is not separate from the business. It's actually part of building the business. But a lot of founders don't want to hear that, right? But here's the big lesson. You can't lead at a level that your nervous system cannot hold or maintain. More revenue means more capacity. More team means more capacity. More visibility means more capacity. More responsibility means more capacity. And at some point, the next stage of business growth requires the next stage of personal development growth and personal capacity. Now, let's get back to it.
How do you then, in terms of like the survivor to student of the psychology and the physiology of the human experience, you've got that nailed down. But obviously with every level, there is a new level of learning from a business perspective or from an entrepreneurial perspective. How do you go through the traffic lights of tolerance in terms of the business side of things, especially when you're going to a space that you've never been before? Because again, you went from learning it for yourself to I could help one other person to I could help a little group of people. Maybe I could help a bigger group of people. Now you're a franchise owner and you've got, IFS and you've got CPD accrediting your courses, and now it's the only accredited course in the world of your things. You're going through levels that have never been done in your sector, which is a sector that needs trust more than any other sector potentially. Yeah. So how do you go through the traffic lights of tolerance of business growth, so to speak?
So I can give a really great example of that, from a team member perspective. So again, we've had a team member leave recently and caused chaos behind the scenes. No one would have known publicly. Nobody would have known, but behind the scenes, but behind the scenes, it was very chaotic. And it'd been chaotic for a while. And I was, I'd got team members saying things to me, and then I'd kind of have a conversation with this person who wasn't open to hearing really ownership and responsibility on their part. There was a lot of defensiveness. Her wounds, and I absolutely got that. So I would try and change tack on how I would have that conversation. I can have hard conversations without getting defensive or critical. I can have someone have a hard conversation with me. I might feel I want to get defensive inside, but I'm able to hold that and still show up regulated, okay? Even though I want to argue something maybe back. And, this particular person, I kept having conversations with them month after month, and nothing changed until the point it probably became untenable, because I actually started to put things in place. And I think about this from a leadership perspective here, because this was my stuff. And so I started to put things in place that would highlight the chaos more than me saying it was chaos. It felt like I wanted the evidence of that, because then maybe she'd see it then, because she wasn't listening to what I was saying, even though the team was saying stuff, even though I was trying to have a conversation about time management and taking too long with certain tasks. But there was no openness to that. And I let it go on far too long. As a leader in my business, when she left, it wasn't nice. And there was a lot of hurt, probably on both sides. But you wouldn't have known I was hurt as such. I held my hurt at home myself, because it's nobody's job to fix that for me. Nobody. So as a leader in my business, I did feel hurt. I felt really let down. I felt really angry, and I felt really sad all at the same time. But I never externalized that towards her. I had to look at myself as a leader, even though I knew that there had been a lot, probably for 4 months really, that shouldn't have gone on that long. But I picked up the slack for all of that. And I had to look in the mirror and think, okay, what am I learning from this? What have I learned from that? Now, I could have sat in the place and been like, oh, she did this or she didn't do that. I was paying her, nearly 10 grand a month for over a year. There was no change. There was nothing. It was a mess. All of this. I could have sat in that space, externalizing it. Okay. What good would that do? I needed to look in the mirror, and the question I had to ask myself was, why did I let this go on for so long? That was my stuff. And I realized there was a lot of my own trauma there because I knew her as well. I wanted it to work, the hope of it working. But actually, I could feel myself burning out because not only was I running the 3 businesses, I was having to make sure everything was okay in her department as well, and making sure. So it felt like I was doing her role and I was paying for her for that, and still running everything else. And I needed to go and actually look at, why didn't I act sooner? And it was a really big leadership lesson for me with that and I've had to learn this. This has probably been one of the hardest things for me in building my business from a leadership perspective, because we get a lot of people wanting to work in my business, in my community as well, and who want to make a difference. They want to come and work with us. And very early on, we'd get people coming in, and then all of a sudden it'd be like, oh, I've actually got to work. I've actually got to do something. It's like,
I could just hang out.
It is a business. And I learned very quickly, actually, that they wanted to come and work with me. It was in my space. And as lovely as that is, I'm still running a business.
Yeah, of course.
So then we kind of re-looked at how we were recruiting. But then what we found is we ended up getting quite a few people who were, I've got an amazing community, but some of the people then that we had working for us, their sense of worth came from working in our community and doing good with the people that they were doing. But it was becoming codependent. So we had some tutors, we had certain people that were working in spaces where they were, again, inadvertently keeping people stuck that I could see, because if they were stuck, they were idolizing the person that was helping them. That's not what I'm about. Even in my programs, even in my certifications and qualifications, I do a whole piece around codependency when you work in this space. Because I could work with a ton of people and keep them stuck where they're going, oh, Caroline, you're so amazing. Oh, you're so good and everything else. And I could keep them in that space. I don't want that. I want them to be dependent on themselves, not their only safe spaces with me. That might be good for my ego, but that's not good for them. And I don't want that for anybody. So again, I had to look at the people that we were attracting. We want empathy, but we don't want codependency. So that's been another learning curve for me from a leadership perspective, because also what I found was if we had to give notice for those people to leave, I'm the villain. I am the villain because all of a sudden it's all about money for me then. And that's been really difficult as well. Sitting in a space of knowing I want to build a business with authority and helping people, because the more money I earn, the more free stuff I can put out there. That's how I see it. The more free stuff I can put out there for those who don't have any money. But if we have to give people notice because they're not actually performing in their role, very often I'm seen as the villain in that. And it's been a real challenge for me as a leader in that. And I realized in this particular case, there was still some residual trauma with that. I didn't want to have a really, really hard conversation with this person and really step into my own CEO role with that, because I kept hoping and hoping and hoping. And I've learned a really big lesson there, that if something isn't right with a team member now in my business, I will be having that hard conversation. Again, we are trauma informed and we'd absolutely have it. There's struggles or there's things going on. We absolutely want to help people. Don't want people to go. If we've invested in training, I don't want them to go. But it's the balance of there is still a role. And I know you're still a human being behind that role as well. But we've got to get that balance right as well. And I think that has been a real challenge. I think one of the biggest challenges of my business, I would say, has been that. And it's highlighted it even recently for me. And I think I've had to have a really good look in the mirror. And I've also felt sometimes when I've looked in the mirror around this, I feel like I don't want to become a hard business owner. I don't want to be a leader that is hard and like, I'll just fire them then. I'm not that person and I don't want to be that person. but I'm also running a business as well. And I think that tightrope of this is why I built TIDAL, because it's challenging. It's challenging knowing, as a small business still really, that there are roles that need to be met and KPIs that need to be met. And yet people still have lives and struggles and things going on, because even one person out of that, the big cog, it falls on other people as well. And I think that's the piece I've probably found the most challenging, being made to be the villain if we've had to give people notice, or we've put things in place or tried to have conversations and people have got defensive about stuff as well. I think people struggle with having a conversation about a role and not taking it personally.
Do you find it more difficult? Because obviously I imagine that your staff, especially your key hires or your C-suite or your more senior hires, will all be trauma informed, but most likely that if they have come through the process, almost they've come to work here, they've got such a desire and a drive to work here because they want to have that impact. Everyone's been through a traumatic experience to some extent, and they want to do good for themselves but do good for other people. Do you find that dealing with trauma informed people, is it more difficult in a way because they kind of go, I know what she's doing here, she's trying to she's acting in this way?
I think it's better if someone is truly trauma informed. You can have hard conversations, know it's a hard conversation, but no, it's not personal.
And do you frame it like, I know why I'm doing this with you? Can you do that?
So, I might say to someone, I'm going to have a really hard conversation now. Remember, this is about the role. You are amazing. I'm talking about the role right now, because obviously that is what we're talking about from a business perspective. Now, some people, they're fine with that. Some people have really struggled with that, okay? And there's also a key difference. This is something as well. There's a difference between trauma-informed and trauma experience. Some people think they're trauma-informed because they've experienced something. And again, this highlights the person that I had. But they are not trauma-informed. So really, everybody we get on now has to go through our programs. They have to go through it. They have to have an understanding of it.
The next evolution, I guess, for you within the business is growing the brand of the company. So you've obviously got multiple companies now. It's gone from Caroline Strawson, who is the expert of the thing, to TIDAL and the mental wellbeing company, which is the franchise. And obviously the franchise will spin off its own micro versions of Caroline Strawson's, and there'll be Caroline Strawson's in specific sectors. The world of Caroline Strawson's. But how do you think about growing a brand that's not built on your personal brand? Are you mindful and cognizant of that, or are you quite happy to now maybe it's the wrong word, but let the brands take the heavy lifting of growth rather than it having to be predicated on you, in essence?
I feel like I've come a bit of a circle with all of that. So the starting point was very much me as the brand and building the one-to-ones and the groups and stuff. Then I've built the businesses that, yes, I use my brand to build the businesses, but all three of them feel very separate entities in their own right now. And I feel like I'm coming back to my personal brand again with that. It feels like I've come a full circle. And again, we're looking at creating a CIC now as well around domestic abuse, coercive control and violence against women and girls, because that's a real passion of mine as well. And I want to do more trainings in those areas in particular. So it feels like it's been this natural evolution of now coming back to the personal brand. Yes, I talked a lot about abuse and narcissism even right at the start, and that's, where initial followers might have come from. But it feels like, I feel like I want to take people on a journey. I don't want people's lives to just be defined by trauma or abuse. It's an ongoing journey when we talk about the nervous system and building capacity. And, life has struggles. Yes, I was in an abusive relationship and I've still worked on all of those elements, but it's about my relationship with my kids, my relationship with my husband, my relationship with my father, my sisters, my friends, as a business owner, all of these things as well, overcoming chronic illnesses, mental health conditions. I really want to challenge the system around mental health. And I know I'm always up against that because traditionally we do look at the sort of talk piece, the psychology and everything else, because it's what was done. And again, it's not about taking away the benefits of all of that. But there is a huge missing piece around mental health and trauma healing, which is that nervous system stuff. If I hadn't done that, I would absolutely not be where I am now. If I was just purely talking about this stuff, I wouldn't have even had 5% of the success. And I genuinely believe that. So it's changing the systems as well now.
I guess weirdly, you're having to fight two systems because you've got the sort of the medical big pharma infrastructure. Like, you've got a problem, here's a tablet to solve it. Or on the other side, it's like, well, sit back and talk about your feelings. You're kind of going against both of those things and going, well, actually, it's not the tablet, it's not the talk, it's the physiological understanding of it.
It's like self-healing almost. It's always about, the same. If I'm in any pain, I don't automatically think, oh, what diagnosis have I got or what tablet can I take? And again, it's not, I was in a medical profession. It's not that I'm against, pharmaceuticals or anything medical. But we need to be having conversations about why. That woman who goes to the doctor, for instance, and then gets diagnosed with fibromyalgia, an autoimmune disorder, that doctor should be asking her, what's your relationship like at home? What's your home life like? Because 80% of autoimmune disorders are in female people pleasers, and people pleasers are magnets to abusers. So, we should be looking at anybody with a chronic illness, really. The majority of them, not all, but most of them, is somebody living in survival. Why are they living in survival? What has happened in their past? Is there stuff we could do with that? What is happening to them right now? We're not asking those questions. All we're looking at is a presentation of behavior, not what's happened to them for the behavior. We're labeling everything as disorders. Why isn't it a response? If we label things as response, then we start to get curious. Why am I responding like that? Where is that coming from? It takes the power back to ourselves.
That's a hell of a battle that you've got in your hands there, isn't it?
It is.
Jesus, but if anyone can do it, it might just be you.
I get asked so many times to go on TV, and then they'll say, what are your qualifications? And I list them all out, and they say, oh, you're not a psychologist. I'm like, no, I chose not to be. Like, oh, no, we need a psychologist. I'm like,
yeah, and henceforth the problem continues.
Absolutely. And that's not to say they don't have a place, because they're so knowledgeable, and it's important to know about attachment. It's important to know, like CBT, the cognitive behavioral therapy, this is my behavior, this is the therapy to change my behavior. But why is the behavior there in the first place?
Yeah.
Let's try and change that.
Yeah.
And that's that nervous system piece.
Final question then, in terms of what you're building out now, which again, I just think you're such a wonderful human being, having once been on the, not the receiving end, the receiving end of your support in a moment of crisis. And I think you can really tell what someone's like when you actually pick up the phone and go, Carol, I know you're amazing at this thing that you keep talking about. I'm struggling with it. I won't say what it was, but you were so quick and kind with your support, but it was so true to, it was such good advice delivered in the way that you'd, when we'd be doing like content together and like long form videos and stuff, I'm like, gosh, you really know their stuff. But in the moment, like, you really knew your stuff. And so I'm forever grateful for the support that day. And that's why I don't just like watching you win. I love watching you win because I know the place that it comes from. But in terms of you now going from the person of influence as the Caroline Strawson brand to the CEO of the companies and the umbrella companies that sit above the stuff, what's the biggest change that you've got to make in yourself? Or what's the biggest or the most exciting evolution that you've got to go through, you reckon?
I think now being visible as the woman I am today, that's probably, I would say, one of the challenges with that, because it means as well not stepping away from the woman I was, because that's an evolution of who I was, but still getting the balance right as the business owner I am, the woman still working on herself, the mum, the daughter, all of those, and hoping that my audience come along on that journey with me. Because for me, it's about, we're all in this together. The world is a really angry place right now. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it's hard. life is hard right now. People are struggling. And, if I can help people cope better in the struggle, not wait for the struggle to stop, but cope better by building that capacity. That's the journey I want to get people to come on with me, to live their lives in the presence of all of the stuff going on and realizing they can still have a beautiful life in the process.
Are you a bit worried that the audience might not get it? Sorry, no, I said it was the last question, but I lied. I completely lied. Because obviously they're so attached to the story that you've taken them on and the journey, and hopefully a lot of them were like, wow, look where she was, to even, through the journey of recovery from 2013 to now, there's been a beautiful evolution. But is there a point where you go, I've built a great business and a great life, but in order to help more people, I have to risk the ones that I've got not getting it?
Yeah. And that's probably why it's taken me a couple of years to get to this place, to be fair, because I really get that. And I think I've come to the place now where I can't not share what I now know for the ones who are ready for their next level. The ones who aren't, that may go and follow somebody else around narcissism or whatever. I understand that. I understand there's a need in that moment to understand those things. And I will still talk about that because it's still part of, my own experiences. And I don't judge people for it either. And yes, I am sure some people won't follow me anymore because they're still in their own trauma around the abuse that they have experienced. But I'm hoping that they will see some of the stuff I'm going to be talking about, and it might just gently get them to look at what they've experienced through a different lens. And those who are ready to take that little step as well, giving them a pathway and an understanding and non-shaming way of moving forward as well, and asking some difficult questions for people as well. I think I put a post on Facebook yesterday, and it was something about, if you're always saying, I'd die for my children, but are you willing to do your own healing for your children?
Oh.
And I thought, that's powerful. And I put it on and I said, this might be hard for some of you, because I was that woman.
Yeah.
I'd do anything for my kids, anything. But actually,
you won't do the same for yourself, which is inadvertently for them as well.
Correct. The biggest gift you can give your kids is to work on yourself.
What response did that post get?
Positive. I mean,
was it?
Maybe
okay.
Behind the scenes, people might be like, ooh. I hope
she's
I framed
changed.
it. Exactly.
She's
I know, who's
now
she
she's
now?
rich.
Exactly. I think how I framed it, because again, I said, woof, this one landed with me as well.
Yeah.
And I framed it as, this was me. So I'm saying, if that is you now, that was also me. But actually, the gift I've now given my kids in working on myself, that is priceless.
Well, where can people find more information about who you are and what you're doing? Where's the best place for them to go and find out about you and follow on this journey of continued evolution?
So again, if it's sort of the trauma piece in all of this, definitely Instagram and Facebook. If it's the sort of leadership and management piece in that, then probably LinkedIn. And then, I've got my websites and stuff as well. There's the TIDAL website, the Mental Wellbeing Company one. There's the Strawson one as well.
It's a global takeover for the betterment of
absolutely.
humanity.
I know. Absolutely. World peace. Here we come.
Thank you so much for your time. I've loved this conversation.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it.